two of the most common things that we hear from students when they're reading questions and they're struggling with getting questions correct is A, I get stuck between two answer choices and I always choose the wrong one. B, I will study something, I'll know it really well, and then I'll get a question wrong on it. And then I'll read the answer explanation after I've gotten it wrong and realize that I knew most, if not all of the information in the explanation, but yet I still got it wrong. The reason behind this is that they're having a hard time seeing the concepts behind it. So I'll give you an example of a question about this where someone thought, oh my gosh, this is such a random detail. I knew everything there is to know about this condition, but I just happen to not know that one detail. And so the question was something like, what would you see on an echocardiogram when someone has a massive PE? Now note that this came from a step 1 bank of questions where it would be really, really difficult for someone to understand it if they were just in their first or second year of medical school. And so you've got two choices when you look at a question like this. You might think on the surface that, hey, this is a really, really specific detail that I just need to memorize, right? You've got a massive PE, you've got an echocardiogram finding, like you just have to memorize that thing. Or you could look for the concept behind it and try to figure out which concept this is really getting at. If you really look at the concept, it's actually pretty simple. The massive PE, conceptually, actually is just representing an increase in afterload. Peel back all the layers, really the question is asking you, what would you see in the heart if you had a massive increase in afterload? Now, if you're able to see this conceptually, imagine how much easier this question would be to answer once you're learning things well, once you're never forgetting it, is when you're doing questions, you want to always ask yourself, what concept are they testing me on? And try to simplify that question so that you can understand the concept behind it. Now in sports, just as in studying, champions are ultimately defined by their execution. And so to score really high in step 1 or step 2, you need to think about your execution, and specifically, you want to execute analytically. So the way to think about this is sort of like Moneyball or being a professional card counter. And so what do I mean by that? It's interesting to note that it only takes about 4 to 5% on one of the step 1 or step 2 NBMEs to increase your score by about 10 points on the 3-digit score. And so it's actually not that big of a difference, right? So in other words, on step 2, if I wanted to increase my score by 10 points on NBME 12, I would only need to get about 4% more questions correct. This is important because really what you need to ask yourself is, okay, what can I do to increase the likelihood of getting a question correct by just 4 or 5% on my next NBME? The way to do this is to make sure that you find small differences and probabilities on all of your questions. Because if you can do that, you can have really large impacts on the outcome. Let me give you an example. In the NBA, in professional basketball, Steph Curry is considered one of, if not the greatest shooters of all time. What's interesting is that his 3-point percentage is 44%. The average NBA player's 3-point percentage is 36%. When I looked this up, I thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna have like a 50% shooting percentage, right? But in reality, it's actually only an absolute difference of 8%. In other words, he's figured out a way to just increase by small increments, right, his ability to get shots at a higher rate. And so for high USMLE scores, yes, you have to master the content. Yes, you have to make sure that you never forget it. Yes, you have to learn how to apply it and do it a lot. Ultimately, if you really want to get a high score, like 260s or above, the key is that you want to increase the systemic odds of getting every single question correct. Let's take a really simplified example of this. Let's say that you have a 10-question block and maybe 2 of them are really hard and a few of them are easy and then most of them are kind of medium. The hard ones, maybe you've got a 40% chance of getting them right. The easy ones, maybe you've got an 80% chance of getting them right, and the medium are maybe 60%. The goal is basically to increase your chances of getting a question correct for every single question, especially the easy and the medium difficulty questions, right? Most of us, when we're studying, we tend to focus on the hardest questions because those are the ones that are most challenging. And so we spend a disproportionate amount of time on the things that we don't know. However, look at the number of questions that you're getting wrong that you have the knowledge for. My guess is that if you're like most people, roughly half of the questions that you're missing, knowledge wasn't the critical limiting factor for you getting it wrong. Instead, there was something wrong about the way that you were approaching the question. So maybe you were reading too quickly and you were missing critical words. Or maybe you are when you get stuck between 2 answer choices, maybe you're just not approaching it properly. Maybe you are expecting that the answer is going to feel perfect. And so when that one thing doesn't make sense, you're throwing out the answer. So if you found this helpful and want to get more questions correct for the knowledge you already have, be sure to click in the description for our 14-step free program. And if you want help getting there faster and want to work with our team, you'll have the option of booking a free assessment with our team. And if it makes sense to work with you, we'll explain exactly what it would look like so that you can get a higher score in less time.